9 mixing techniques that new producers and mixing engineers and how you can fix them. When I started out as a uni student, all I wanted to do was open up a session, start mixing, throw faders, add some EQ, apply a bit of compression because I was ready to try all the cool stuff I read the pros were doing for other artists like Adele, Florence and the Machine, and whatever Sound on Sound was featuring that month. But this is the first mistake most new producers and mixers make, and that is mixing before things are prepped and edited to a T. Now, what I've got here is my assistant's checklist, okay? This is what he ticks off when he prepares my mixing for me before I get started. Now, there's some pretty important things he does here which actually helps me a lot when I'm mixing the record. One of them is gain staging each region to -6 decibels true peak, because I like to use this plugin here, the BX SSL channel strip. And you have to hit it with the right amount of input gain from the signal for it to have a certain tone and sound. Another thing you might notice is all these regions are stripped of their silence, which is really important because if there's unnecessary noise in between takes or passages, I don't need it there. He also adds the tempo marker, all the time points for the intro, the pre, the verse, the chorus. This is really good for when I'm making automation. And also my assistant does a run through print down here and makes a marker of the loudest section of the track. And this is really important because before he sends it to me, I have a VCA fader here and he actually gain stages all the channel strips so that I'm feeding my mix bus at about -6. So that way, if I use any analog emulations or compressors, I'm feeding it with the right amount of gain to get a certain sound out of that signal. So all my gain structure's set up, all the cleaning up of the clips is done, and I'm ready to go off to the races and start mixing. But so many people miss this step and they just go straight into throwing faders or EQ and compression that they end up chasing their tail mid-session, and that is a recipe for disaster. Another thing I did that would absolutely my mixes as a new engineer was scooping the low mids of almost every track because I wanted to avoid muddy mixes at all costs. Between 200 to 600 hertz is usually the fundamental register across 3 octaves or 2.5 really. It's like 2.5 octaves of instrumentation, and by attenuating these fundamental frequencies, you don't necessarily clear up the mud of the mix. You just weaken the fundamental of each of those elements and everything ends up sounding thin and tinny and unnatural. So let's actually look at where these fundamentals sit. That's about 160 to 220 hertz. Then let's go to the pluck guitar here. 160 to 360 hertz. Let's get away from the guitars. We can go to these synths here. And there's definitely a pad layer there below 400 hertz, which is really important. I can't just scoop that. You go to even the background vocals, and there's multiple harmonies here, but you'll notice where the fundamental is. Have a chance to make it work. 200 hertz. 400 hertz. Let's go to the chorus lead. Chance to make it work. We didn't even have 300 to 450. All of these fundamentals are in that low mud area people always carve out, and then they have a really thin, tinny mix. So you can do volume automation, duck things in and around one another, pan things. If there's 2 elements in a very similar register that need to be focused on, have one out slightly to the left, out slightly to the right. Harmonic saturation, you can duck one in volume, but saturate it slightly so some of those harmonics help it ring through, but just avoid getting rid of that fundamental by over EQing the low mids. You can even use sidechain compression and decide which one element do you want to have focus more and sidechain that to the other. This feeds into when I hear a high pass filter on snares because you're trying to make the snare drum snappy. So you get rid of the low frequencies, and it's the same deal as before. This kills the fundamental chest of the snare and relies on all the harmonics to make a cut. So what ends up happening is you cut the lows out, or a lot of new mixers will cut the lows out of the snare, and then start boosting the top end, adding saturation to the top end, adding expanders to the top end, and you end up with super anemic mixes and snares which just bite on the ear. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a level match version of this snare drum, one with the high pass filter and one without, and you can tell me which one fits better in the mix. Which one sounds fuller, like it has more impact? Well, obviously the one without the high pass filter, because that fundamental that needs to cut through is actually there. Pink noise mixing. People do it to get a relative balance of everything. I've never been into a pro studio with a good engineer that says, hey, let me just get the pink noise playing so I can balance this track. I don't want to point out all the flaws with this technique. I want to offer you guys an alternative, something practical and pragmatic. And here is how I set up my relative balance for every session. So for contemporary music, you have a few things. You have the rhythm, which typically is denoted in the kick, the downbeat or the backbeat. You have the bass, which is the body of the track, and the vocals, which is the focus. If these three elements can balance well together, this is better than any pink noise mixing is going to do, because this is going to give you the core that everything else can build around. This leveling won't be the set and forget. Like, it's just a starting point. The kick might come up, the bass might come down later on, but we just need a good foundation. So that is fundamental and kick set at the same volume. Okay, so the fundamental, the kick, the fundamental, the bass. How do I do this? All right, let's put that on Do Not Disturb. How do I do this? I have two instances of Insight, okay? And the reason why I have two instances of Insight is because I get very, very, very finicky with my spectrum analyzer. And we should have the same size spectrum analyzer. There we are. Come on, give it to me. There we are. The reason is I like to have, I don't know why Insight doesn't have this, but I can't actually, like, I don't have any horizontal lines here as a reference. I use this meter here to reference there. I know it's a little bit clunky to do it like this, but let's keep it rolling. So we're going to solo the kick. Put this down here. We'll solo the kick and we'll play that through. Okay, so the fundamental of the kick is somewhere between 20 to 15 decibels roughly there. This is just my starting point. It's not the final point. Don't get your knickers in a knot. Then we go to the bass and we got to get it to a similar relative level. So this is where I finish the mix. I actually finish the mix with the bass down to 3 dB, but as a starting point, I would have this bass up an extra 2-3 dB, just so the fundamental of it is in line with the kick. So let's find the bass VCA, which is just here. And what we'll do is we'll bring that up 2 decibels. I'll bring it up 2.5. Simple fix, throw out pink noise mixing, try this out and you'll thank me. The next one is over-processing the channel strips. And the reason why this is an issue that fucks new mixers and producers, because if you stack a whole bunch of plugins on a channel strip, it gives you very little control. It's actually really difficult to manage and manipulate that single channel in and of its own when you get mix requests, or you need to update a mix, or you need to tweak things according to what a client's requesting. It makes you chase your tail, because one plugin feeds into the next, feeds into the next, feeds into the next. And if you change one on one, the rest of them are all going to change the way they relatively work. The best thing to do is start using parallel. So I can change how heavy I want this kick drum without having to go into what would be 3 plugins, because I've got the SSL channel strip, the DBX 160, and the Pultec there. I can just manipulate it on one fader, which is really important, and also maintains the integrity of the phase relationship between the original signal and the other original signals, especially in a drum mix. So take a listen to the way this kick drum changes tone between the verse to the chorus. Nice little technique there, which can help you especially develop sounds, have more flexibility within your mixes to automate things and get creative. The next one is too much reverb and delay. I was a culprit of this, and I would douse everything in reverbs and delays so I could hear the effect of the reverb and delay better. And that's not a good thing, and sometimes I still make this mistake. However, there's a super quick and easy fix for this. What you need to do is, if you look over here, where's my effects? Let's go here, modify. I have an effects channel, so all my parallel sends and delays and effects and everything is in a group. And what I've done is I've taken that group and added a VCA fader here called Effects and Parallel Processing. The beauty of this is it's like a wet-dry knob for all my delay and reverb and special effects on a mix. So if a client says the mix is sounding way too wet, instead of having to go through each and every single plugin or channel, I can just go to this VCA fader here and be like, oh, I'll just bring it down 2 decibels, and then how wet it is just come down slightly. It's just like a wet, dry slider knob for the whole mix. And just as a side note, if you're a Pro Tools user and you want to get this template, there's a link in the description to go and get it. It's one of my passion projects, putting this template together, because it serves me well every single day. And if you're in Pro Tools, I'm hoping it can really help you put together really good sessions. Now, the next one is mixers who oversaturate their vocals with harmonic exciters. Now, this is something I've never done as a mixing engineer. Like, I do add harmonic saturation, but I always hear this as a mastering engineer where people just go over the top, and that is excess harmonic saturation on vocals for bright or sheen a client might be requesting. So you add more and more and more because they want it brighter or cleaner or sheenier, and it becomes edgy and harsh. And what's worst is these harmonic saturation channels don't have any de-essing on it. I hate when I hear saturation without de-essing because all the sibilance comes out harsh. So if you must go super bright on a vocal or harmonic saturation channel, use the most aggressive de-essing you can on that saturation as possible, because sibilance going through harmonic exciters makes my ears bleed, and please just do that as a word of warning. So there you have it, my list of 7 things fucking new producers and mixing engineers. Until next time, take care.